In this episode, we're going to build a practical awareness of reconnaissance, which is the phase where attackers learn about an environment by observing what it reveals. Beginners often picture network recon as a dramatic hacking scene where someone types commands and instantly sees a map of everything. But the reality is more patient and more subtle. Reconnaissance is often about collecting clues that systems leak naturally, like names, patterns, error messages, and metadata, and then using those clues to narrow down the best targets and the easiest paths. Recon matters because most successful attacks are not random. They are guided by information that helps attackers choose where to focus, what vulnerabilities to attempt, and which identities or services are likely to unlock more access. The good news is that recon also gives defenders leverage, because many recon signals exist only because of optional exposure, inconsistent configuration, or careless information sharing. The goal today is to help you recognize the types of observable clues attackers use, understand how those clues turn into attack plans, and develop instincts for reducing unnecessary exposure without breaking legitimate operations. A strong starting point is understanding what we mean by observable clues. An observable clue is any piece of information an attacker can collect without already being deeply inside the environment. And that includes both technical signals and human signals. Technical clues can include public-facing domain information, visible service responses, network behavior, and version hints that leak through banners or error messages. Human signals can include employee names, job roles, email formats, vendor relationships, and documentation fragments that appear online. Metadata is especially valuable because it often reveals structure even when the content is protected. For example, you might encrypt traffic but still reveal which domains are contacted and at what times, or you might protect a document's contents but still leak author names, internal file paths, or organizational naming conventions. Attackers use these clues the way a detective uses footprints, not as proof of compromise, but as guidance about where to look next. For beginners, the key insight is that recon is not only about breaking in. It is about learning enough to make breaking in easier and more reliable. Reconnaissance often begins with what is publicly attributable to an organization, because public information sets the outer boundary of what an attacker can learn without sending a single packet to the target. Public records and domain-related information can reveal what systems an organization likely uses, what providers host their services, and what subdomains exist for different functions. Even the structure of names can matter, because consistent naming patterns make it easier to guess additional resources. Attackers also pay attention to public web content, like error pages, response headers, and configuration details that might leak technology stacks. None of this requires breaking anything. It is simply listening to what the environment is already broadcasting. Beginners sometimes think that because information is public it cannot be risky, but recon shows that public information can be combined into a detailed picture. The risk is not one piece of information. It is the mosaic created when many pieces are assembled. When attackers move from passive recon to active recon, they start interacting with the target's exposed services to see what responds and how. This is where network mapping becomes visible. Attackers look for which ports are open, what services are listening, and what protocols behave in certain ways. Even if a service does not explicitly announce its version, its behavior can reveal hints about what it is and what it might be vulnerable to. Active recon can also include measuring how systems respond to unusual requests, because error handling and edge case responses can leak details about underlying components. It's important to understand that active recon does not necessarily look like an attack. It can look like normal web requests and normal connection attempts, just repeated and organized. This is why monitoring and rate controls matter, because recon tends to involve pattern and volume. For beginners, a useful mental model is that recon is the attacker building an address book of what exists, what is reachable, and what seems misconfigured, because those misconfigurations often indicate the easiest entry points. Metadata is one of the attacker's most powerful recon tools because it reveals structure without needing to see protected content. For example, file names, directory structures, and URL patterns can reveal what kinds of systems are present and how they are organized. Error messages can reveal internal host names, software frameworks, or configuration values that help attackers tailor their next steps. Response headers and cookies can reveal technology choices and sometimes security settings, which can indicate whether a site uses modern protections or legacy ones. Even timing and size patterns can reveal what kind of data is being processed, such as whether a request triggers a database lookup or whether a file download is likely to be a certain type. In many environments, logs and telemetry contain metadata that is not intended for outsiders, but may be exposed through misconfigured storage or dashboards. This is why defenders often talk about reducing information leakage, because even small leaks can guide attackers toward the right exploit. Beginners should remember that attackers don't need secrets. They need enough clues to make their work efficient. Another major recon domain is identity and organizational structure, because attackers often want to know who to target with social engineering or credential theft. Information like employee roles, leadership names, and vendor relationships helps attackers craft believable messages. Email address formats and naming conventions help attackers guess valid usernames, which is useful for password guessing and phishing. Public posts, job listings, and documentation can reveal what tools an organization uses, what platforms they depend on, and what skills they value, which indirectly reveals technology stacks. This is not about blaming individuals for being visible. It is about understanding that public organizational information can be weaponized. Attackers use what people share to build context that makes their communications sound legitimate and urgent. For beginners, the lesson is that recon is not only technical scanning. It is also social mapping, and the two reinforce each other. A technical clue might tell an attacker what system to target, and a social clue might tell them who has access to that system. Reconnaissance also involves looking for trust relationships and third-party exposures, because attackers often choose the easiest path, not the most direct one. If an organization's main systems are well protected, attackers may look for a less protected vendor, a partner integration, or a public-facing tool that has weaker controls. Third-party services can create additional domain names, subdomains, and access portals that expand the visible surface. Attackers may use recon to find forgotten test systems, staging environments, or old portals that were never fully retired. These forgotten assets are common because organizations evolve quickly and it is easy to leave something behind, especially when teams change and projects end. Recon also includes finding exposed administrative interfaces or management endpoints that were intended to be internal but are reachable from outside due to misconfiguration. For beginners, the key point is that network mapping is not limited to one neat boundary. Modern environments are interconnected, and recon often discovers weak links at the edges and in the relationships. Defenders can respond to recon by reducing unnecessary visibility, but that must be done thoughtfully, because hiding everything can break legitimate access and can create operational blind spots. The better goal is to minimize information that provides attackers with high-confidence guidance while maintaining the functionality users need. This includes reducing exposed services, standardizing responses so error messages reveal less internal detail, and ensuring that public-facing systems do not leak unnecessary metadata. It also includes keeping inventories accurate and retiring old assets, because forgotten systems are a recon goldmine. Another important defense is consistent configuration, because inconsistency is information. If most systems are hardened, but one is not, recon will find the outlier and attackers will focus there. Consistency is not glamorous, but it is one of the best recon defenses because it prevents an attacker from quickly identifying the weakest target. Beginners can think of this as making the environment less chatty and less uneven, so the attacker gets fewer directional hints. Monitoring is also part of reconnaissance defense because recon often leaves patterns that are visible if you look. Attackers probing many ports, enumerating many URLs, or generating repeated error responses can create logs that show unusual frequency and breadth. Even careful attackers often need enough activity to build a useful map, and that activity can be detected through rate patterns, source diversity, and repeated requests across many endpoints. The purpose of recon detection is not to stop every scan instantly, but to reduce attacker dwell time and to prompt defensive action, such as tightening exposed services, adding rate limits, and investigating unusual access. Recon detection also helps you validate your exposure posture, because if you see recon targeting specific services, it may be a sign those services are visible and attractive. Beginners sometimes assume that because recon is low level, it is not worth monitoring. But in reality, recon is the prelude to exploitation. Detecting it early can give defenders time to patch, isolate, or harden before an attacker moves from mapping to entry. A subtle but important recon concept is that not all mapping is malicious, and that makes the defender's job harder. Search engines, security researchers, and legitimate scanning services also map the internet, and their traffic can resemble attacker recon. This means defenders need context and policy to distinguish expected scanning from suspicious scanning, rather than reacting to every probe as a breach. That said, the fact that benign scanning exists does not reduce the risk, because attackers can use the same mapping techniques and can even use public scan data to learn about targets. The defensive mindset remains the same. Keep exposure minimal and consistent, monitor for unusual patterns, and fix what you find quickly. For beginners, it's helpful to view scanning as inevitable in the modern internet. You cannot prevent people from observing what you expose, but you can control what you expose and how informative it is. To close, building reconnaissance awareness means understanding that attackers map environments by collecting observable clues and metadata that systems and people reveal naturally. They start with passive observation, then often move to active probing to identify reachable services, misconfigurations, and weak outliers. Metadata is especially valuable because it leaks structure and technology hints without revealing protected content, and social information helps attackers target the right identities and craft convincing messages. Recon also expands into third-party relationships and forgotten assets, which are common weak links in modern environments. Defenders reduce recon value by minimizing exposed services, limiting information leakage, maintaining consistent hardening, and keeping asset inventories current so old systems aren't left behind. Monitoring for recon patterns helps you detect pre-attack activity early and respond before exploitation begins. When you think about recon this way, you stop treating it as an abstract hacker activity and start treating it as a predictable consequence of exposure, which you can manage through disciplined design and operational hygiene.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.